So this video, I'm doing for me. I want to preserve my memory. You know, sometimes we forget things that we've gone through, and I just want to remember the little things. So that's what this video is all about. So as you can see, I'm back home, and I'm by myself. The last video we did, we told you the NG tube was out of his nose, and it's been a couple of weeks now, and I haven't been able to video. I haven't felt like video, and so really don't even feel like it today, but I'm gonna do it. You know that old saying, you fall off the bicycle, you get back on? Well, I'm trying to get back on. We after we did that last video where he had the NG tube taken out, later that night he started getting sick and started throwing up, and we just had a rough night. The next day, he didn't want the NG tube put back in, but he was just so sick he just didn't know what to do. And I remember at one point, I got up to go to the restroom, and he had got to the foot of the bed, laid the pillow on the foot of the bed, was laying there. And I turned around, and I remember seeing him, and he had lost so much weight. And I just started crying, because then it really dawned on me. You know, there had been many times I'd washed his back or you know, just touching him, and I realized he had lost so much weight. But he was laying there, and he said, "I don't know what to do, Jan, I'm hurting." He said, "I don't know about the NG tube or not." Well, they wouldn't put the NG tube back in. They knew things that we didn't know, just to be honest with you. Later that night, that was on a Thursday night, the little nurse came in, and she was going to change his IV tubing, and she left out to go get him, and she come back. She said, "Don't worry about it. I'm not going to do it right now." And then she left out again, and she come back, and she said, "You may want to call your family. You know, just have your boys come in." And she didn't really say it like that. She just said, "Well, you might want to call your boys." And so finally I just asked her, I said, "Are you telling me that I need to call my boys?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Are you saying you don't think he's going to make it?" And they said, "Yeah." And so I said, "When?" She said, "Well, either tonight or early in the morning." And then she told me, she said, "But he can hear everything." I said, "Well, I've never held anything back from him, and he's never held anything back from me." And we're not going to start now. So I called the boys, and they came up, the whole family, the grandkids, everybody came up. I kept watching his breathing, and I was counting his breathing, and he was breathing. I looked it up on YouTube, on Google, and his breathing was normal. And they had give him medicine to help him with the nausea, and then they had give him something else. It helped with the nausea, but it also make you sleep. And I remember watching him the minute they giving that stuff in his IV, he just, drooped down and couldn't talk, and he was just asleep. And up to that point, he had been talking and, everything, but the medicine just made him sleep. And so the boys came up, and everybody spent the night, and the next morning, he was still breathing normal. If he'd get sick, he'd wake up, and he had a bag, and he would throw up in it, and then they'd come back and give him more medicine to help him relax and to try to help with the nausea. And so finally, I just told the boys, I said, y'all all go home. That was on Friday, and I said, y'all just go home. I said, if I see a change, I'll call you. And so Scott, our oldest, and Andrew with his family, they all finally, went home, because you got 4 babies there. That was a lot. And so Daniel stayed with me, and then eventually I told him to go on home. Well, one of the nurses, she was a wound nurse, and a great friend. Thank you, Tara, for being a friend. She came in and stayed with me for 4 hours that night, just talking and visiting, and it was just off the clock. It was such a blessing. She just became a friend over that period of time, and she left probably around 9 o'clock, and I sat up for a little while, and finally, around 10:30 something till 11, I finally went. I slept right beside him in a chair, so I went to sleep, and I just kept watching him, and I woke up about 12 o'clock on the 18th. It was Saturday morning, and he had gotten, the medicine made him really hot, and Randy is very modest, but he would get where he'd just pull the cover and the gown off of him and not realize anybody was, he just trying to get comfortable. So I told the nurse that night, I said, if you come in and he doesn't have the sheet on, I'm sorry. I said, but he doesn't realize it. And I said, she said, I understand. I know how he is about his modesty. And she never came in until I called her. And so at 12 o'clock when I woke up to check on him, he couldn't find his bag to throw up. I never heard him throw up. But he had grabbed his gown and held it up to him, and he threw up in his gown. It was on his face and his chest and down his arm. And I got up and I got him a warm rag and I washed him up and I put a fresh gown over him. And then I called the nurse and asked her to come help me clean him up. And I checked his breathing. And his breathing, Daniel would come in and I telling him to leave. I want to do this in private. I checked his breathing and it had changed. And so I called the boys and they all came up. And they got there around 1, between 1 and 1:30. And probably about 3 o'clock we all laid down. Scott went to the truck and slept, and Daniel went into another little room that had a couch and laid on it. And the oldest grandbabies was with the other grandma, but the baby had to stay with Mama, and so she just held him. It was so precious. She just held him in her arms and slept in the chair with him and crawled up in it and slept. And Andrew had fixed a pallet on the concrete floor and was sleeping there. And about 6 o'clock I woke up, and I got up and I looked at him, and he wasn't breathing. And I immediately hollered, Andrew! And it scared Andrew. He jumped up, and it must have scared Randy because he started breathing. And I said, Andrew, get your brothers in here now. And so he got on the phone and told them to come on in. And that was around 6. And we just, the nurses came in. He wasn't talking, but he was uh, uh, the whole time. And I thought, well, if he starts throwing up or if he's just uncomfortable. So I'd asked the nurse, and she come in and she said, well, you want me to give him something to relax him? And I said, yeah. And like I said, the minute he took that stuff, it usually you just watch him just relax. But he never did. He kept the whole time. And we didn't realize it at that moment, but he was talking to us. And so we just sat around his bed. You know, all pull chairs up around, and we sat and we would talk, and we would tell him we loved him. And I had told him that these lips had not touched anybody for other than him for 36 years. And they wouldn't touch another till I seen him again in heaven. And I know there's not going to be husband and wife, but still, I'm married to him. And then we just, like I said, we just kept sitting and talking, and, you know, crazy things you talk about, but he was trying to talk to us the whole time, and we just didn't realize it. And at one point, I'd asked him something, and he mouthed home. And I said, well, Randy, if you want to go home, you can go home. I said, don't worry about us. We'll be okay. And I thought he had died. It looked like he quit breathing. And we started crying, and he come back. He started breathing again. And they had actually, the nurses and the managing nurse that was over everybody, she'd actually come in there, and they checked him, and he was still alive. And some other people later come on in. We put a sign on the door that we didn't want to be disturbed, and somebody come in wanting us to sign a paper. Well, I finally decided I'd sign the paper for him, but they realized that he was still alive. Well, you can't sign this paper till he's dead or passed away. They didn't say dead. So they went back out, and then I told the nurse, the managing nurse, I said, I'll call you when we need you. When he passes, I'll call you right away. And she said, okay. So they went out, and they never came back in. And we sat around his bed, and I said, I wonder, when you pass away, people talk about the death angel coming to get you. They talk about angels coming to get you. I said, I wonder who comes to get you when you pass on, when you go to heaven. Well, we sat there a little while, and we was talking about, I kept getting up and touching him and telling him I love him. The boys would touch him, and they would tell him they love him. And, he knew that his family was there and that we loved him so much, and we knew that he was there and that he loved us so much. So we started singing Amazing Grace. And this is when I realized he was talking to us. Because it had, I don't know, we were still singing, but it just kind of gotten quiet. And you could hear him, he was singing Amazing Grace with us. And when I realized it, I looked at the boys, I said, he's singing Amazing Grace with us. And we started singing again, and he was still singing with us.